Uh, so next we're going to have our next speaker, which is Alex Makulit, is an organizer for the U.S. Prostitutes Collective. It's our first time hearing her speak too, and we're so excited to hear from you, Alex. Welcome.
Hi, everybody. Let me know if my internet becomes unstable and you can't hear me. My name is Alex Makulit, and I'm with the U.S. Prostitutes Collective. Us Pros is a multiracial network of women who work or who have worked in the sex industry, organizing for decriminalization of sex work and for resources so that no one is driven into prostitution because of poverty. Growing up, I struggled with poverty, and when I was a teenager, I became involved in the underground street economy. Many of my peers were criminalized and incarcerated for trying to make money any way that they could. Sex work was one of the few options that people with criminal records can do to survive. Us Pros is alarmed at the ramped up law enforcement operations that are taking place for the LA Super Bowl. The law enforcement task force looking into these, I am so sorry. We're really alarmed and ramped up that these law enforcement operations are being ramped up for these Super Bowls. As Nana had mentioned, like, where are these agencies when these women, some of whom were sex workers, were victims of serial murders in South LA? Where were they for the scores of women from the same community who are still missing and their loved ones don't know if they're still alive or if they're dead? The law enforcement task force looking into these murders and missing women have been disbanded. Meanwhile, federal, state, and local law enforcement are brought in under the pretext that the Super Bowl is a magnet for human trafficking. We have seen this trend before, where Super Bowls and other large sporting events are falsely connected with a rise in sex trafficking and become an excuse for police crackdowns, while sex workers who are victims of violence are ignored for their murders, or their murders referred to as NHI, no human involved, as Nana also mentioned before. Like, how dare they? That's not right. Racist, sexist, and classist anti-trafficking enforcement leads to street sweeps, stings, and raids, including of sex workers, whether they're trafficked or not, houseless people, and others in low-income communities and communities of color. For example, when the Super Bowl came to San Francisco, where I'm based, sweeps of the street community took place throughout the whole city. Police raids and sting operations target the most vulnerable sex workers, women who are working the streets. Black, trans, and migrant women are disproportionately targeted. Anti-trafficking operations also include arrests of women working in massage parlors, hotels, online, as well as men accused of buying sex. Data from a report on policing and prosecution in Los Angeles shows a pattern of racist and sexist enforcement of prostitution laws in LA. 89.7% of those arrested for soliciting prostitution are women, while the report quotes that Black people are disproportionately impacted and drastically overrepresented in prostitution-related charges. Black people make up over 50% of these arrests. And this is also a trend we see for everything else. Often Black people also make up more than 50% of the population in the jails, which is ridiculous. There are more statistics that you can look at some of the reports that we've added on the Stop the Raids website as well. So what's clear from these statistics is that women of all experiences that are living in poverty, especially women of color, will be the most impacted by the Super Bowl anti-trafficking operations. A recent report on over-policing and sex trafficking is highly critical of and spells out the harm of anti-trafficking operations. It reveals inhumane, traumatizing treatment of women during operations by law enforcement, which include verbal, physical, and sexual abuse. It shows that these operations are, in practice, anti-sex work operations. They fail to identify any victims of trafficking, and if they do, actual victims don't get the help or resources they need. These truths are not just being reported through research in the United States. Our sister group Empower in Thailand also released a report called Hit and Run, which shows the damaging impact that anti-trafficking policy and practice has on sex workers' human rights in Thailand. Internationally, these laws have been used to stop women crossing borders. Empower points out that restrictions against safe, independent migration should be the foundation of any discussion around trafficking. In the US, migrant sex workers face arrest and deportation following anti-trafficking raids. One of the US report's conclusions calls for poverty relief. Us Pros has been campaigning for measures to tackle women's poverty, which is increasing. 73% of people living in poverty in the United States are women and children. The fastest growing population among the homeless are women, as well as women being the fastest growing population of those going to prison. We demand to know what the budget is. How much have local, state, and federal agencies spent on these operations? We and the general public have a right to know. This is money that could have been used to help tackle poverty and not further criminalize us. Poverty is driving more of us into sex work to survive. Many are single mothers, and this is why we are a part of a campaign for a care income for the work of caring people and the planet. We are calling out the lies behind this trumped up scam that these anti-trafficking operations are needed to keep people safe. What we need are rights and resources. We have been campaigning for decades and have won many victories along the way. Recently, we've won an immunity from arrest bill for sex workers reporting violence in California, also known as Senate Bill 233. We've also won victim compensation for sex workers and formerly incarcerated people and more. We have a Know Your Rights booklet on protection, justice, and compensation, which covers these protections and other campaigns that we are involved in to win decriminalization. The movement for decriminalization is growing nationally and globally. Recently, there was also an anti-loitering bill that was repealed in New York, and many states have introduced bills challenging criminalization. It is more important than ever that we continue to come together and fight anti-prostitution laws, and for a world where ending poverty is a priority, and meanwhile, where poverty is no longer criminalized. Thank you.